The forest was too quiet that night. Even the wind held its breath. She should have turned back when the scent hit her. Wild, electric, wrong. But something in her blood wanted to see what the darkness was hiding. Then she saw him, half shadow, half flesh, eyes burning like moonlight caught in water. He didn't move. He only watched her, like the night itself had found a heartbeat. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of the monster. She was afraid of what she wanted him to do. Welcome to the Dogman's Omega, a forbidden love story whispered between breath and blood. Stay close. Don't look away. And if you can still hear your heartbeat when this is over, remember to like, follow, and let the darkness find you again. The palace reeked of obedience, of polished stone, wet fur, and fear too old to fade. Era moved through it like a shadow, her tray trembling in her hands, her collar humming softly against her throat, a reminder of who she was and who she would never be. The Alpha King's laughter rolled down the corridors, heavy and sharp, followed by the scrape of claws and the scent of dominance. Every sound made her flinch. Every silence felt worse. Eyes down, Omega. She obeyed. She always did. But as she bent, her gaze caught a flicker in the polished floor. Her reflection, pale and empty, eyes full of things she wasn't allowed to feel. When the cup slipped from her hands, it didn't just shatter. It screamed. The back of a guard's hand answered it, fast, brutal, routine. Outside, the steward snarled, "If you can't serve, you can run. Take the king's message to the border." The border, the edge of the known world, where wolves stopped hunting and monsters began. The gates opened with a groan that sounded almost human. Ira stepped into the night, clutching the sealed letter like a heartbeat. The rain had stopped, but the world still dripped, with fog, with silence, with something unseen. The forest was close here, too close. Trees leaned inward like they were listening. She walked faster. The scent changed. Not wolf, not earth. Something alive and watching. Her steps slowed. The air thickened, vibrating with a sound she couldn't quite hear. Then came the growl. Deep, drawn out, felt more than heard. Her breath hitched. She turned, too slowly. Between the trees, two eyes opened, gold, unblinking. The letter slipped from her grasp, forgotten. The growl deepened, not angry, almost questioning. And in that heartbeat between terror and curiosity, Era forgot the meaning of fear. The night had found her. The night held her scent like a secret. Era ran until the palace lights were no more than a smear of gold behind the fog. The letter was gone, lost to the mud, but she kept running. Each breath burned, sharp and cold, and still the feeling of being seen clung to her like a second skin. A branch broke somewhere behind her. The sound was deliberate, heavy, slow. She turned. The forest looked empty. Yet the dark had weight now, a shape pressed between the trees. It moved once, and the air itself seemed to kneel. Moonlight slid down a shoulder of shadow, caught in the outline of something too tall, too still. Not wolf, not man. The wilderness made flesh. He didn't lunge. He didn't growl. He only watched. The distance between them felt alive. The silence throbbed. Every instinct begged her to run, yet her legs forgot how. Then a gust of wind shifted. His scent reached her. Earth after lightning, cold smoke, something older than fear. It filled her lungs before she could stop it, and for a heartbeat the world narrowed to the sound of her pulse answering his. She stepped back. The shape melted into darkness as if the forest itself had swallowed him whole. She ran until dawn. When she reached the outer sheds of the palace, her hands were shaking so badly she could hardly untie her cloak. The water in the basin trembled with each breath. She splashed it over her face, expecting to see blood, scratches, proof of the creature's touch. Nothing. Only her reflection staring back, eyes wide, pupils blown, the mark of the night still inside them. But beneath her ribs, something ached. Not pain, not wound. Something deeper, like claws had traced the edges of her heart and refused to let go. She pressed a hand to her chest, half afraid of what she'd feel. The echo of that growl still lived there, quiet, waiting. And somewhere beyond the walls, the forest breathed her name. The forest called her back. She told herself it was duty, another errand, another punishment. But when the gates closed behind her, the air felt different, quieter, expectant. Era followed the same narrow path through the wet grass, pretending not to notice how her heart steadied when the trees began to lean close again. Every sound of the palace faded behind her. Only the hush of the wind remained, thick with memory. She reached the stream at dusk. Water moved like molten glass, slow and silver. And there, half-shadowed by the reeds, he was, bent beside the water, drinking as though the earth itself had offered it. The light slid over him, across fur, across scars, across strength that belonged to no kingdom. Era froze. The forest seemed to hold its breath around her. A bird startled somewhere above. Her basket tilted, berries spilled, rolling down the slope into the stream. The sound broke the moment like shattering glass. He lifted his head. The motion was unhurried, the kind of still power that needed no roar to warn. For a heartbeat, their eyes met, hers wide, his unreadable. And then he moved. He crossed the distance in silence, crouched beside the water where her basket lay overturned. Without speaking, he reached out, gathering what she had dropped, setting each piece gently back into place. His hand brushed hers. Heat flashed through her like the memory of fire. Not pain, something older. Her breath caught, the forest spinning around the sound of it. He stopped, still holding the last of the berries, and looked at her as if the act of looking meant something sacred. "You shouldn't be here," he said at last. The voice was rough stone sliding through water, more growl than speech. She couldn't answer. Every word she might have said dissolved into the quiet between them. He leaned closer, scenting the air around her, the way wind learns the edge of a flame. The moment tightened until she thought even the stream might forget to flow. Then he spoke again, lower this time, a rasp against the night. "You smell like fear." A pause long enough for her pulse to betray her. "And something else." The words clung to the air like smoke, too heavy to vanish. She turned and fled, the basket forgotten once more, but the sound of his voice followed. Soft, certain, impossible to outrun. Sleep did not come easily after the forest. When it did, it came with the smell of rain on fur and the glint of golden eyes behind her eyelids. Every night she woke with her pulse racing, certain she'd heard his voice somewhere in the dark halls. But there was only the palace, its endless corridors, its whispers, its watchers. "The little Omega smells different," one of the guards muttered as she passed. "Like the wind after lightning," another said, half teasing, half uneasy. The scent followed her. It would not wash away. Even the king's attention sharpened when she entered the throne room, his nostrils flaring as though catching a memory he couldn't name. "You've been beyond the walls again," he said, smiling the way wolves smile before they bite. She bowed low, heart hammering. "Only to serve, my king." "See that you remember who owns your scent," he murmured. The words clung to her long after he'd turned away. She wanted to scrub herself clean, to forget the forest, the stream, the eyes that had looked at her without command or cruelty. But forgetting him felt like holding her breath forever. That evening, while folding linens in the servants' quarters, her hand brushed something hard inside her satchel. Not cloth, bone. She drew it out carefully, a small token, smooth with age, carved with a pattern that seemed to move when the light touched it, circles within circles like ripples frozen in ivory. Her breath caught. She remembered the way his hands had shaped the earth beside the stream, deliberate and wordless. He had left this, for her. Outside, thunder rolled over the hills. A storm gathering. The other servants hurried to close shutters, but she couldn't move. Something pulled her toward the open courtyard. The air smelled of wet leaves and distance. She stepped into the rain. Beyond the outer wall, where the forest began, mist wove through the trees like smoke. Then she saw him, a shape between trunks, half hidden by shadow, half carved by lightning, still, silent, waiting. For her. The token warmed in her hand as though it knew his name. The king's message never reached its mark. Somewhere between the gate and the border, the scroll had vanished, and now the hounds were loose. Era ran. Mud clung to her steps, rain blurred the path, and the forest rose like a wall of black glass before her. Behind came the shouts of palace guards, their torches flaring like hungry eyes. "Find her," one barked. "The king wants her breathing." The branches closed around her as if the woods themselves had chosen sides. She stumbled into the clearing where the stream cut silver through the dark. And there he was. The Dogman. He moved from shadow as though carved out of it, each step deliberate, silent. The rain touched him and hissed away. Scars ran like old language across his skin, his eyes burned the color of melted amber. The guards crashed through the underbrush, blades drawn. Before she could speak, the world blurred, motion too fast, too brutal to follow. Growls. Steel meeting something harder. The scent of fear spilled thick as smoke. Then silence. She blinked. The torches lay scattered, their flames dying in the wet. The guards were gone, swallowed by forest and night. Only he remained, breath low, gaze steady. "You shouldn't have come back," he said. She swallowed the words rising in her throat. The rain had stopped. Mist hung between them like a veil. "They would have killed me," she whispered. He tilted his head, studying her as though weighing the truth of her voice. The look wasn't cruel. It was almost curious, lonely, the kind of loneliness that recognized itself. "Why do you help me?" she asked. "Because they hunt what they don't understand." The answer wasn't enough, yet it settled into the quiet like a promise. She took a step closer, unable to help it. The air changed. His scent filled it. Wild, rain-cooled, alive. He stepped toward her, closing the space until the air between them trembled. His voice dropped, rough as gravel sliding through smoke. "You smell like fear." A pause, deep enough to swallow her heartbeat, and something else. He leaned nearer, the heat of his breath brushing the edge of her world. "Don't come back," he murmured. "I won't let you leave again." The words struck through her like lightning finding ground. The palace did not sleep. Whispers moved faster than wind, curling through the marble halls and into every ear that lived by rumor. "The slave has a scent," they said. "Not wolf, not clean." Era felt those words follow her like chains. Everywhere she walked, heads turned slightly, nostrils flared, conversations fell silent. Even the torches seemed to watch. On the 7th morning, she was summoned. The Alpha King sat upon his throne of carved bone and silver, eyes the color of old storms. 2 Beta guards flanked her, their breathing deliberate, testing the air around her. "Come closer," the king said. She obeyed, the collar at her throat cold as fear. The Betas leaned in, scenting her like predators scenting prey. One frowned. The other's ears twitched, uncertain. "Something has touched her," one murmured. The king rose, slow and deliberate, each movement heavy with quiet threat. "You've been beyond the borders again, little Omega?" "To serve your messengers, my lord." "And yet you return changed." His fingers brushed the air between them as though feeling the ghost of the forest clinging to her. "Be careful what hunts you in the dark. Some creatures bite what they love." The chamber emptied, but the weight of his words did not. That night, Era slipped from her quarters, moving through the sleeping halls like smoke. The guards dozed, the moon guided her. The wind carried the faintest trace of a scent she could no longer live without. The forest welcomed her back. Shadows folded around her as she reached the stream, heart drumming the rhythm of a story she didn't yet understand. Kyle was there, waiting. "You shouldn't have come," he said, but the edge in his voice was already softening. "They'll kill you if they find you," she whispered. "Then they'll have to find me first." For a moment, neither moved. The night hung between them, stretched thin by things neither dared to name. Her breath trembled. His presence filled the silence until it felt almost warm. He stepped closer. The air thickened, the world shrinking to the space where their shadows touched. The forest seemed to hold its own breath, listening. Her courage wavered once, then found its voice. "You said I smelled like fear." "I still do." "And now?" His answer came not in words, but in the smallest shift of distance, the quiet surrender of the night itself as their foreheads met. A heartbeat later, the silence broke. The taste of rain, of danger, of something she would never forget. When they parted, the forest was still shaking. The forest learned their secret first. Every night Era slipped past the palace gates, and every night the wind seemed to wait for her. The path to the stream grew smooth beneath her feet, shaped by repetition and by something she could no longer call fear. They did not speak much. Words felt too small for the quiet between them. Sometimes he brought her fragments of the wild, stones shaped like moons, feathers that smelled of rain. Sometimes she only stood near him until her pulse stopped racing. Their meetings became ritual. The forest their chapel, the night their witness. Once, when thunder cracked above the trees, she flinched. He reached for her instinctively. The movement was simple, protective, but it left a trace behind, a thread of scent that bound itself to her skin like memory. She didn't notice until later, when she returned to the palace and the other Omegas turned to stare. The air shifted around her, curious, uneasy. "You've been out again," one whispered. "You smell wrong," said another, but not unkindly. That night she tried to wash it away. Water could not touch it. It wasn't on her surface. It lived deeper, where breath meets heartbeat. A mark of the wild. The next day the king's beta called for her. The guard stood close as she entered the corridor, their steps echoing in time with hers. "Stop," one ordered. "Look at me." She obeyed, spine straight though her hands shook. The guard leaned nearer, scenting the air around her. His expression shifted from curiosity to anger in a heartbeat. "That's not Wolf," he said, voice rising. "That's—" He caught the scent again, and his words broke into a growl. "Who touched you?" The question struck the hallway like a blade. All sound drained away. Even the torches seemed to shrink from it. Ira's breath caught, the truth pressing against her tongue like fire. Somewhere beyond the palace walls the forest stirred, as if the one who had marked her already knew. The first body was found at dawn, torn ground, broken steel, a single hunter's torch still burning in the mud. By midday, the king's rage had filled every corridor. His voice carried through the palace like thunder, wrapped in command. "The forest is cursed," he declared. "Something hides there, something that kills my men and carries its scent into my halls." Era heard the proclamation from the shadows of the servants' wing. Each word fell like a drumbeat against her chest. She didn't need to be told who the something was. That night smoke rose from the palace courtyard as hunters gathered. Wolves in armor, their eyes sharp with the promise of blood. They carried nets soaked in silver, weapons carved with symbols meant to wound more than flesh. Era slipped away before the gates closed. The forest called to her, frantic, alive with warning. She found him near the stream, the air around him torn by scent and storm. Mud streaked his arms. The look in his eyes was not guilt but something older. Rage bound in restraint. "They came first," he said, voice low. "I didn't mean to kill him, but he would have told them where you walk." "You shouldn't have fought them," she whispered. "Should I have let them take me?" His question wasn't a challenge. It was a truth too sharp to swallow. The forest was already thick with the smell of death. Soon every wolf in the kingdom would follow that trail. "They'll come for you," she said. "Then I'll be waiting." His calm frightened her more than any roar. He stood in the dim light, every breath a quiet promise of what he would do for survival. For her. "You can't fight them all," she said. He stepped closer until the storm's scent wrapped them both. "I won't need to, if you stay away." Her pulse stumbled. She wanted to speak, to argue, to promise anything but distance. The words would not come. They stayed in the space between them, trembling. Somewhere far off, a horn sounded, the call of hunters closing in. He turned toward the sound, every muscle ready for what came next. "Go," he said, "before they sent you too." Era ran, the forest blurring around her. When she reached the edge of the fields, the first torchlight flickered through the trees. Behind it came the howl, low, furious, echoing through every wall of the palace. The king stood on his balcony when she returned, his silhouette carved against the moon. Below, the hunters assembled, blood still wet on their blades. He didn't look at them. He looked at her. "Bring me the slave," he said, voice calm as stone. "She knows the beast." They came for her before sunrise. No warning, no words. Only hands, rough and certain, dragging her from the servant's wing into the dark heart of the palace. The cell smelled of rust and wet stone. A single torch hissed in the corner. Shadows clung to her like another chain. The king did not come. The beta did. "You should have run," he said, circling her. "The beast leaves a trail, and you wear it like perfume." She stayed silent. He smiled, a thin, humorless curve that meant hurt was coming. Questions followed, sharp as the edges of his voice. "Where does he hide? What does he want? Did you lead him to our gates?" She kept her gaze on the floor, speaking only once. "He wanted nothing until you hunted him." The beta's laughter echoed off the stone, wrong and cold. "Mercy, then. Tell me where he waits, and I'll let you live long enough to forget him." Her answer was wordless, a single breath drawn through her teeth, a tremor of defiance that broke into something harsher. She lifted her head, met his eyes, and spit. The sound that followed wasn't laughter anymore. Hours, or maybe minutes, it blurred. Time lost meaning inside that room. Pain became rhythm, silence became rebellion. She held on to one thought. If I break, he will smell it. And somewhere, beyond the walls, the world began to change. The guards outside the cell paused, uncertain. The air shifted, heavier, charged, like a storm building underground. Dust fell from the ceiling with each tremor. Then came the sound. A low roar, too deep to be human, too wild to belong in stone corridors. The torches shuddered. Another crash. The walls shook. "What is that?" one of the guards shouted. The beta stepped back from Era, eyes narrowing. The roar came again, closer this time, carrying the scent of rain and iron and fury. The door splintered before anyone could reach it. Stone cracked, chains snapped. He was there. Kyle. No words, only motion. A storm wearing a heartbeat. The guards fell before their blades left their scabbards. Era could barely see through the smoke and dust. But the moment his gaze found her, the noise of battle blurred into silence. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered. "You shouldn't have bled," he answered. Behind them, the palace shook again. Hunters gathering, horns rising. But the scent of her fear had already been replaced by his. The hunt had ended. Now came the war. They fled until dawn forgot to chase them. The forest opened into a hollow no hunter had ever found, a place where the air tasted of moss and thunder, and the ground pulsed faintly as though remembering ancient steps. Slowed only when they reached the stream's edge. Era fell to her knees, breathing hard. The silence afterward was heavy, filled only by the rush of water and the quick rhythm of two hearts refusing to calm. "They'll follow," she said. "Not here, he answered. This ground remembers my kind. The words stirred something in the air. Era looked at him then, really looked, and the question that had followed her since the first night finally found its voice. What are you, Kale? He hesitated. The firelight from his hastily built campfire painted his face in gold and shadow. For a long time he didn't speak. When he did, his voice carried the weight of something old. Before the wolves learned to walk upright, before the first alpha drew breath, there were others. The first blood. We ruled the wild when the moon was still young. She stared, trying to measure myth against the living proof before her. You're saying you're one of them? The last, he said quietly. I was never meant to kneel to kings who forgot where their claws came from. My exile wasn't for what I did. It was for what I am. The wind shifted, flames danced, his shadow stretched long against the trees, no longer wolf, no longer man, something older that made the night itself lean closer. Why tell me? She asked. Because the moment they catch me, your scent will condemn you too. You need to know what they're hunting. She moved closer, drawn not by safety but by the quiet ache in his tone. Then we run together, she said. A faint smile crossed his face, gone before it fully formed. You don't understand what you're saying. I do, she whispered. The palace was never home. This, she gestured to the dark, the wild, the place where their breaths mingled in the cold air. This feels alive. He looked at her as if the words hurt and healed in equal measure. Ira, he said, and the way he spoke her name made it sound like a vow. The forest answered with a shiver. Somewhere distant, a branch cracked. Kale's head snapped toward the sound, eyes narrowing. They've found us. The scent hit her next. Wolves, but not the palaces. Sharper. Wilder. Your clan? She asked. His silence was the answer. The fire dimmed as though fearing what was coming. They won't take me, he said, but they'll kill you to make me kneel. The first growl rose from the trees, deep and familiar. More followed. A chorus of blood ties turned to threat. Ira reached for Kale's arm, but he was already moving, his expression gone to stone. Stay behind me, he said, voice low, steady, final. The shadows between the trees moved. Eyes, too many, blinked open. The heirs of the first blood had come to reclaim their own. The attack came before the dawn had fully formed. A ring of eyes closed around their camp, yellow and familiar. Kale's scent went taut, anger, grief, recognition. Then the shape stepped forward. His kin. Brother, one said, voice rough with age and contempt. You've forgotten the laws that made us. Those laws forgot themselves, Kyle answered. They didn't argue. They struck. The clash was silent only in memory, blurred motion, breath, and the thud of impact. Era tried to follow, to run, but hands caught her. The forest reeled. Her cry was lost in the noise of old blood meeting new loyalty. When she woke, ropes bit into her wrists. The air was thick with the scent of smoke and wet fur. Around her stood Kale's kin, their eyes hard, their words sharper. The king wants the girl, said the eldest. He pays in silver and pardon. You would hand her to wolves? Kale's voice broke from the shadows. He was bound, half kneeling, every breath a warning. You broke our silence, the eldest snarled. Now you'll watch the cost of it. Era met Kale's gaze through the firelight. The world shrank to that line between them, his steadiness, her fear. She shook her head once, the plea in her eyes clear. Don't. But when the hunters came at dusk, wolves wearing the Alpha King's colors, Kale stepped forward before they could reach her. Take me, he said. Let her go. The eldest hesitated. For a heartbeat it looked as if mercy might find its way through bloodlines. Then greed settled the matter. You'll die either way, he said. At least your death will buy peace. The wolves bound Kale in chains heavy with runes that hissed against his skin. Ira tried to fight, her voice lost in the clamor. A blow caught her temple. The world tilted. When her vision cleared, Kale was gone. Only the smell of iron and betrayal remained. The next thing she knew, she was dragged through the palace gates again. The same torches, the same cold laughter. But this time, she wasn't the prisoner who mattered. From the balcony, the Alpha King watched the procession. Beside him knelt Kyle, restrained, silent. Another figure, his brother, was forced to his knees. "You brought the beast home," the king said. "Now watch what loyalty costs." The blade fell quickly. No time for mercy, no chance for goodbye. Kale didn't flinch. His silence was louder than any roar. "Chain him," the king ordered. "At dawn we show the kingdom what happens to those who forget who rules the moon." The courtyard filled with the sound of iron on stone. Era felt it in her bones, every link closing like the beat of a slow drum. Somewhere beyond the walls, thunder gathered again. Dawn was coming. Night returned her to the place that had once owned her. The palace gates stood open for the festival of conquest, guards drunk on their own victory. No one looked twice at another slave carrying a tray or bowing too deeply. Beneath the hood, Era's breath came steady. The collar around her neck was gone. Only the memory of it remained, hidden beneath the scent of herbs she'd crushed between her palms. She moved through the corridors like a ghost that remembered every door. Each step carried her closer to the dungeons and the man chained within. The kitchens were her first stop. A single vial, small enough to hide in her sleeve, found its way into the feast's wine. The poison was not meant to kill, only to silence. One drop for each wolf who served the king. Within minutes, their voices would fade, their limbs heavy as sleep. The second stop was the gate to the undercells. No one stood there now. The guards were already swaying. Era slipped inside, the air turning colder with each stare. Kale hung in the center of the room, bound by chains that pulsed faintly with runes. The sight of him stripped the air from her lungs. His head lifted when she crossed the threshold. "You shouldn't have come," he murmured. "And leave you to them?" She touched the chains. Light flared, blue and angry. "They'll burn you," he said. "Then we burn together." She poured the remainder of the vial across the symbols. The metal hissed, cracked, gave way. The moment the final link broke, the world seemed to inhale. Power moved through the chamber like wind through fire. The torches bowed toward them, their flames bending. Kale's eyes caught the light, and for a heartbeat the glow traveled to hers, gold answering gold. Neither spoke. The silence between them filled with something older than language, a pulse that felt like recognition, like home. When he reached for her, the air itself seemed to change shape around their joined shadows. The floor trembled. Above, shouts broke out as the king's court woke to chaos. "We have to go," Era said. Kyle's answer came with a sound, low, deep, not quite a growl, not quite a word. The dungeon doors burst outward. Guards stumbled in, blades drawn, but the first fell before they understood what they faced. Kyle moved through them like stormlight, every strike silent, precise. Era followed, her hands shaking but sure. With every step she felt the same current that had shattered the chains threading through her veins, as if his strength had found her too. They reached the great hall just as the moon broke through the high windows. The Alpha King stood at the far end, cloak thrown aside, eyes wild with disbelief and rage. "You should have stayed buried," he said. Kyle's voice was calm, almost gentle. "You should have remembered whose blood built your throne." The king's form rippled, armor split. The sound was not transformation, but revelation. The monster beneath the crown unveiling itself. His roar filled the hall, shaking the banners from the walls. The final battle had begun. The moon rose wrong that night. Too large, too near, its face veined in crimson like a wound that refused to heal. Every creature in the kingdom felt it. Wolves hid. The trees leaned away from the palace. The wind carried a single message: the wild has come home. In the ruined great hall, Kale faced the Alpha King. The air between them burned. Every breath smelled of ash and storm. "You could have ruled beside me," the king said, voice gone low and cracked. "The first blood should have served their sons. The first blood served no one." They collided. Not a fight. An ending. Stone cracked under their feet. Light flared white, then red. The king struck like lightning, his power all command and hunger. Kale met him with silence and inevitability, each motion carved by purpose, not rage. Era watched from the edge of the hall, the current of their battle pulling the air from her lungs. Every impact shook dust from the ceiling, each echo louder than thought. When Kale fell, he rose again, slower, bleeding light. The king only smiled. Madness wearing triumph like a crown. "He will kill you," someone whispered inside her. "Then let him," she answered. She ran forward, catching the moment when the two forces broke apart. Kale turned to her once. In his eyes was not defeat but warning. "Stay back." The king moved faster than speech. A flash of metal, a sound like thunder trapped in stone, and Kale staggered. The blade found the space beneath his ribs, buried to the hilt. For an instant the world went still. No sound, no breath. The moonlight painted everything red. Kale's hand reached toward her, not for rescue but to anchor her in the moment before falling. Then he was on the ground, the glow in his eyes dimming. Something broke open inside Era, something that was not grief, not rage, but older than either. The air thickened around her, trembling with heat and memory. She screamed, but the sound that left her mouth was not human. It rippled through the hall, through the walls, through the kingdom. The torches shattered. The moon answered. Its light bled downward, wrapping her in color and sound. The wolves outside howled once, then knelt. The king's power faltered, his shadow shrinking before the storm she had become. The scent of rain and earth filled the hall again, the same scent that had followed Kale since the forest. It lived now in her blood. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was the king stepping back, eyes wide, whispering a name only the old gods remembered. Where Era fell, the light did not fade. It deepened, folding into itself until the floor split and the air turned white. Her grief had weight. It pressed against the walls, against the sky until stone screamed. The wolves outside the palace staggered, their howls breaking mid-note. They felt it first, the pull of something older than pack law. The scent rolled through the kingdom, warm and cold at once, carrying memory of forests that had never known a crown. In its wake, everything bowed. The dogman dropped to one knee. The wolves followed. Even the wind seemed to kneel. From the heart of that storm, Kale's body stirred. The mark she had carried, the one written in scent and silence, ignited, threading from her skin into his. Light poured through the cracks of his wounds until breath returned, slow and certain. The Alpha King lunged through the glare, bellowing his last command, but his power found nothing to rule. The ground rose against him, roots and flame twisting together, pulling the throne from beneath his feet. His roar turned to cinders. When the brightness faded, the palace was gone. Only ruins, smoke, and the red ghost of the moon above. Ira stood amid the ashes, hair lifted by the wind that now carried 2 cents instead of 1. Behind her, Kale rose, no longer chained by form or history. The first blood had returned, not as rulers, but as something freer. "They'll call us monsters," she whispered. He stepped beside her, voice rough with quiet laughter. "Then let them run." The forest answered with a single breath of wind, spreading their mingled scent through the night. Far away, wolves lifted their heads and howled, not in fear, but in recognition. The end of the reign of kings, the beginning of the wild.